Afternoon. My name is David Jerome, and I'm with the Chamber of Commerce. And today we're going to discuss part of our ongoing series of how to open your business responsibly during this COVID-19 crisis. We're going to discuss communications. Now, it is one of the three legs, let's say, of where we think you should be in terms of how you think about reopening. Obviously, the first one is safety, and we'll discuss that separately. We also believe making a plan and how you're going to get through this from a business perspective, looking at budgets and other things are important. But equally important, if not more so than all of them, is communications. And when we think communications, not just at the Chamber, but in El Paso, we think of one man, Dr. Richard Pineda. He is with the UTEP, Department of Communications, and at the College of Liberal Arts. Do I have that correct, Dr. P?
Yeah, that's right. I'm the department chair over in communication.
Thank you. And I think if I'm not mistaken, you are a proud graduate of, and I'm establishing your El Paso bona fides here, of the of not only UTEP itself, but which is where you've got your master's, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And you did undergrad at Baylor. And you have your PhD from Wayne State in Detroit, which is where you and I connect a little bit since I was with General Motors for a while. And then I think you went to, I'm just sort of checking very quickly to make sure I have it here, Eastwood, is that right?
Yeah, proud Eastwood high school graduate, proud of the East Side.
Well, the reason I think that's so interesting in part, isn't that where you started debate?
I did. I was a unwilling recruit the very beginning of my freshman year in high school to something that I didn't think I would find enjoyable, and I was hooked instantly. I debated 4 years at Eastwood and then debated 4 years in college at Baylor, and then coached all the way through my PhD. And so I took those skill sets, and in addition to teaching, I do a lot of consulting on strategic communication and presentations and a number of things in that area.
What's always interesting to me is how certain things inform our sort of lifelong pursuit, and not just knowing you professionally, but as a friend, and much to my great honor. I happen to know that you care a great deal about debate. It's one of these issues that you find interesting, and it's become so infectious that I actually find it interesting now when I hear about it. but the thing, and it's not something that I grew up with necessarily. I mean, I was aware of the debate club and things, but it's like a lot of other things. You sort of have so many options when you're a young person that you can go to. You tend to gravitate to those things that you sort of know, and maybe don't always see everything that's available just because we're humans. But debate is something that I intuitively find myself drawn to. In so much is that it would strike me, and I just want to validate this point with you, as a very good foundation for understanding communication. Do you have what did you learn from debate that might have informed your thinking on communications?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think it's three things. The first thing is the ability to be able to look at an issue from both sides and recognize that there are good arguments to be made on virtually every issue, and it's okay to disagree on a particular point as long as you understand the warrants behind the claims you're making, and you can value the warrants made by the opposing claims. I think that's important. I think kind of similarly, debate taught me the idea that you could really disagree with somebody fundamentally or philosophically, but still remain friends, because the idea of what you're talking about is intellectual ideas. And I think that's really important. I mean, I think we're seeing the need for that right now more than ever. And the last part of it, and something that I think I find to be useful all the time, and something I try to explain to people when I work and coach with them, is the idea that being able to express an argument is really the thing that most people sort of forget. And when you're making a presentation, again, whether it's a business presentation or if you're making a plea for a particular position on something, you are always making an argument. And I think a lot of people forget that. A lot of people think that just sort of throwing up ideas is enough. But debate really taught me this idea that you're always framing an argument, and you've got to constantly be repositioning that argument, and it's not static. So I think when it comes to businesses, I'm sure something we'll talk about today. You've got to remind the people that are working in different environments that you're always making an argument for something, and ideally you're making it for your enterprise, and you've got to think about the way that argument is going to come out, who's listening to it, and what they're going to use to evaluate that argument.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And it's one of those things that I have, even at the chamber, I feel we do so many great things, and we have even during this COVID-19, and there's so many opportunities. But if you don't communicate them, you are literally hiding your light under a basket. And normally speaking, you could almost go, well, whatever, I mean, at least we're getting things done. Well, if nobody knows, you're not providing the value that you should to the community and to your members, and even to our employees. And I think maybe, and not only do I welcome you to comment on that, but I would just say that if we drill down for a moment into one of the key constituents for people to think about as they begin to look at opening their businesses and doing it in a safe way, in a responsible way, one of the groups that you should talk to about first is your employees. Do you have any thoughts on how that kind of communications might be special or different in your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I think that you, especially as a business owner, and we're talking about somebody who may have a small enterprise or somebody who's running a Fortune 500 company, your main watch phrases, I think, in both of those or in those extremes is honesty and consistency. And I think that if you think about those different audiences, starting with the employees, honesty and consistency are truly, truly important. So you want to be able to communicate to your employees not only the direction where you are heading, but also to be honest about some of the challenges that you may be experiencing. And I think the reason that you want to do that, and the reason that you as a business leader or a business owner want to do that, is because you want buy-in and understanding from the employees. That doesn't equate with agreement, but they've got to understand, people that are working down the line from you, they've got to understand the conditions and the context of what's going on. So at this particular moment with the pandemic and what's largely affecting businesses, which is a lowered amount of traffic, or in some cases businesses that aren't able to operate, the employees need to be made aware of where things are at and what the trajectories are like for the enterprise. That requires consistent communication. And as I say, this notion of consistency has to be really, really clear to the employees. There should be an expectation of how the ownership is going to communicate to the employees, and there should also be an expectation and understanding of how employees can communicate back to the organization. And what's amazing right now is that we live in an era when there are multiple platforms that we can use to engage different stakeholders. We've got Zoom, you've got FaceTime, you've got Skype. One of the things that's important is that you have to remember that the delivery of the message also requires that people understand the platform that you're using and that they feel comfortable with it. And I think that's something, I think we've lost a little bit of that in the span of the last couple of months, is that I think there's this wide range of platforms. But sometimes if you've got to bring people up to speed on a platform, you're going to lose the energy and the momentum, especially from employees. So I think that it's really, really important that you have some operating standards for the kinds of ways you're going to communicate. And that could be, I mean, there's nothing wrong with an old school, multiple line conference call. I think in some ways we want to chase the digital. And so we want to have these multimodal, multi-person, camera-based conversations. But it's okay to be able to have a phone call that folds in a couple of people and some explanations. But I think with employees in particular, you're talking about consistency and you're talking about honesty, and those both reflect on operational questions. And also even timelines, because I think right now, a lot of enterprises in El Paso are dealing with this question of when can we open and when can we be at a capacity that actually makes financial sense for us. And so for the employees, there really has to be a conversation about what that means for them and what their timelines are going to look like.
I love that. The interesting thing to me, thank you for your comments on this. I want to just take it slightly different direction for just a moment, because you triggered something here. When we look at the COVID-19 crisis, it is obviously a human tragedy in the context of the actual health implications of it. But it has also turned into a business crisis, which we are addressing to some extent here. So how to safely reopen and how to think about that with clear and concise and important communications to help people understand. And I think that is doubly important. And you're welcome to comment on this, because I think this health and business crisis is underpinned to some extent also by a crisis in information. Where do I go to get good information, and who can I trust? And one of the things, going back to the employees, if we're clear with our employees, if we tell our employees what they're meant to do and what the organization is doing or the business is doing, and you're taking good care of them in terms of like being safe with them, I think it helps build trust even with outside of the employee base, right? I mean, it's if I do this right by my employees, it's likely that I'll do it right by my wider community. I just find it very intriguing. But are you finding, is with your expertise in this, are you finding that the statement that it's not just a healthcare and a business crisis, but also an information crisis, does that play true to you?
I think it does. I mean, I think, again, I mean, without trying to make, digital technology and social media the kind of whipping boy for the conversation, I think what's interesting is that we have so many channels and so many avenues to deliver messages to folks. And I'm not entirely sure that there's one better than another, but it does set up, I think, some unusual expectations. It's sort of like the phrase, water everywhere and not a drop to drink. I think there's two factors that are significant, I think, to dovetail what you're talking about and asking about. The first thing is that I think tone is incredibly important, and I think that businesses of all size should recognize what tone they want to take in talking about the situation that's unfolding because of COVID-19, or even in relationship to some of these issues related to the incident in Minneapolis. Tone is incredibly important, and I think the way that companies address employees, that tone is especially important. The tone is consistent when it comes to the consumer base is incredibly important, and that consistency is crucial. So I think that tone is a part of it, and I also think making sure that there's a certain reliability, not only in information or an understanding of what's going on, so that the different stakeholders recognize that. And I think what's a little bit challenging is that more so, if we were talking about crisis communication 20 years ago, and I were to say to a group of people, as I would have then, that you have to control the message and you've got to be sort of consistent and always present. That was different 20 years ago, where you didn't have Instagram and Facebook, and if you don't have an update within 5 minutes, people lose attention, or they get angry, or they shift around. And so tone and expectation, especially with social media, involves a lot of operational tempo, and making sure that what you do is you again create a sort of expectation of when things are going to come out and how you're going to do them. And I think one thing that I've seen at the national level that we've maybe lost locally is there's been a lot of really interesting advertisements and commercials that are focused on process itself. And I think people forget, business owners sometimes forget, that the external audience may actually want to know what's going on behind the scenes and behind the curtain. And I think there's some great space to be able to show you what's happening and how business owners are reacting to that. And I've seen a few excellent examples in El Paso. They just happen to be in the restaurant space, where an owner of a business kind of walks people physically through a building and sort of says, here's what we're doing, or here's how we've changed this. You have the ability to do that. Before, that would have required a camera crew, that would have required a lot of cost. You can shoot reasonably well with a phone and have a decent quality if you've thought through what it is that you want to show them. And I think that's the thing that's amazing, is we've moved out sort of a professional level of communication process, and we've taken on a lot of that ourselves. But that's also, I think, that there's a promise in the peril, which is that a lot of people say, well, as long as we've got a Facebook page, we're good to go. We've got our messaging down, and they've mistaken the channel with the message itself. And I think that's really important. And again, whether we're talking about a small 4 or 5 member small enterprise, or if we're talking about Fortune 500 size companies, you need to make sure that you are controlling the channel and that you understand that that's distinct from controlling the message. And once you've got both of those things set up, I mean, when we're talking big corporate structures, I mean, like you're familiar with, you've got teams, right? A team that is just on each of those areas. But for small, medium enterprise, you are the team. And so that's, I think, a very practical conversation that's worth talking to SME owners about, is to say that make sure that you identify what your channels are going to be and make those distinct. And that will reflect a little bit of tone, but then make sure that your messaging is consistent and the tempo for that. So if you say to your audience, listen, every Monday, we're going to give you an update on when we're going to open, and we're going to tell you what the status of our operation is like. And every Wednesday, we're going to give you a glimpse into what comes next. And every Friday, we're going to feature one of our employees or have some people from the community talk about the enterprise. Something that everybody knows they can drop in on a given day and know what's going to happen. If you're shooting messages out every day or even every other hour, or you're reacting to people's criticisms or concerns that they have, then I think everything kind of goes really pear-shaped.
Yeah, it actually triggers for me, and I'm glad you've already started the transition, because I wanted to move from employees, which I think are such an important communication constituency for business to pay attention to, because I think so much of your credibility is derived for how you treat your people. But also, if we switch to our customers, or in the chamber's case, like our members, one of the things that I think is sort of interesting to sort of to dig a little bit deeper into where you were already going on multiple channels and things of this sort. I think, there's an old adage that still strikes me as quite right when it comes to communications, although I'm happy to be educated by professionals on this. But you say it 7 times and they hear it once. And so being focused and things like that is, I think, still remains, it's sort of like this funny tension, right? You have to be focused and willing to say the same thing almost until you feel that you're bored with your own messaging, and it's probably only then sinking in. But also, you have all these multiple channels that you can begin to leverage. And do you mind just talking about how messages are widely received and reinforced in this day and age with customers and, in my case, members, as we sort of say?
Right. Well, I think that's absolutely significant, that you want to make sure that the mission or the deliverable that your organization has is understood, that doesn't change during a time of crisis, and that the consumer or the member base of what you're talking about sees a consistent and continued value. And I think that's really important. I think that what a lot of, if you look at the national level, the best example of this are commercials that have been run for a lot of the national enterprises. I've seen this for insurance companies. I've seen this for big delivery services. I've seen this for large car companies at the national level. And what they've tried to do is they've not only tried to sort of reassure the audience of their role in what's going on and their attempt to try to help people, but they're reemphasizing their brand. And the way that they're doing that is by signifying and showing their brand in action. So seeing, for example, an advertisement for one of the large national insurance companies, the way that they framed their outreach was a very sort of humanitarian. Their agents were doing work above and beyond what they would do to fulfill their mission. I think people are looking for this kind of value add in what companies can offer, and they do want social goods to be a part of the organization. You and I have talked about this before, but I think even more so in a moment of crisis, do businesses really want to make sure that they're communicating this value add to a variety of different consumers. You want to reassure the consumer that you already have that what you're doing isn't going to change, and you're still the same company that they worked with before the crisis. You want people that are on the bubble, that are thinking about coming to your business to see a value for how their money is spent, that not only will their needs be met, but your company is doing social good and is engaging the community as a whole. And you want to try to speak to people that have never thought about using your service, and why that service or why that commodity that you offer has a tremendous value to them if they've never even thought about how to consume that product. So that gives you a line of different messages, and they're going to be a little bit different depending on that audience base. But fundamentally what you're doing is you're taking the brand and you're taking the core of the business or the organization that you have, and you're explaining to those different groups of people why you matter. And I think, you know, the previous question with employees is interesting, and I think it was Mark Cuban who made this comment at the beginning of the C-19 pandemic that said that a lot of companies are going to gain or lose business based on how they treat their employees. That's going to be part of the message that comes out. I think that's also true for how they treat their customers and potential customers. And so I think you're going to see some very purposeful strategies that indicate what businesses are doing and that are very purposeful to talk about the impact beyond the product that they deliver. And I think so you're going to see some ways in which brand changes, you know, not the significance, I think even more so, but I think you're going to see the way that people are commodifying that good. We know that younger consumers, and particularly people that would be described in that millennial category, are very, very focused on what businesses do. It may not necessarily affect their particular relationship with the good or with that brand, but they want to see that the brand that they believe in is doing something for social good. And I think that that's really important. So again, if I was coaching somebody in this space as a business owner, I would say, think about how you represent that and think about what you use to connect to your consumer base, your bubble base, and the base that you want to bring in entirely new. Is that through narratives? Is that through images? Is that through language that emphasizes the social good that you are making available? Is it a time to use testimony, right? Language from people that have benefited from that, or images of people that are benefiting from those services or what you do. You got to find a bunch of different ways to make that narrative consistent, because the other thing we know is that not every single audience is going to consume the message the same way. And my only sort of cautionary caveat I would add to this is that, remember, in an era of social media, what you are likely to find when people comment on a business or an enterprise is not the good that they're doing, but rather a problem or an issue that the consumers encountered with that business. Social media is definitely the double-edged sword in that regard, that you do have people that will comment in the positive, but it's largely as a reaction to somebody who's commented in the negative about a business. But somebody who has been wronged or perceives they've been wronged by a business, wow. I mean, there really is nothing more than a consumer scorn to really make a business owner nervous about social media. So there is a caution there.
Yes, for sure. Well, I'm just checking the clock, and we're getting very close. So what I was going to do, if I could, is because what people should also know that I find so edifying is when I talk to you in other venues, and I think we can definitely come back to customer needs at some point and things of that sort. But one thing that I think they should know is that you're actually an extraordinarily good coach on just how to be effective as a speaker. And so we've talked about some of the content that people should be thinking about, how to think about their employees and their customers. But if you were to give just one tip before we wrap things up, it's just how to speak well, or how to be effective in your communication, just as a person-to-person level, or sort of the one thing you'd recommend, what would that be?
I think the most significant thing that anybody making a presentation, especially if it's part of a pitch for a business, I think has to be focused on what the audience, that particular person that they're talking to, what that audience needs. Because I think all too often, and you know, a lot of organizations and different groups have sort of pitched the elevator speech. We'll teach you how to do the elevator speech. And to a certain extent, that's fine. I mean, I think that's a useful skill, but truly, what I think that anybody doing a presentation, any sort of business owner or somebody in an organization, is they really need to be thinking more about audience analysis. So if I'm going to go make this argument to somebody, what is it that the person that I'm talking to needs, and can I make the argument that bridges that need? And that's different than the elevator speech. I think we've trained people even in sort of the basic public speaking 101 class, like, you know, stand up and have your points in a concise manner for 30 seconds to convince a person to use your business. I think that's wrong. I think we flip the script on that and we say instead what you need to be doing is you need to spend that bit of time you've got before you start thinking about that person as an audience member and what that particular audience needs. And even with this previous example we talked about, that's going to change. So if I'm trying to appeal to somebody who's already one of my customers and I just need to keep them in the flow, that audience member is going to want to see consistency and is going to want to see the continued excellence that the business provided. If somebody is on the bubble and they're thinking about your business, that audience member is going to have a different set of needs. They have no framework for consistency. They're going to want to know what's new and the value add. And so those are two very distinctive arguments. And if you're talking to a third person who's never used your business, may not even see the need for your business, that audience member needs to be educated in a very different way. And so I think it's less about having a standard set pitch. I think business owners know exactly what their business does. What they don't oftentimes leave enough time for is to think about who that audience member is and why that appeal is going to be different. This is not a one size fits all approach. It's got to be considering the audience that's going to consume the message more almost than what the core message is.
That strikes me as just intuitively spot on. I do think that's extremely important. It's not an elevator pitch. It's knowing the needs and making sure you're addressing them. I think that's a fabulous way for us to end our conversation today. Doctor, thank you very much. Do me a favor, please. Tell the lovely family and ladies in your life how much we appreciate them sharing you with us. Please also note what a wonderful ambassador you are for UTEP, which you are, and we're very lucky to have you in that capacity. And also, I think finally, not to underestimate, just a wonderful leader for El Paso. And so having you be part of this is a delight. What I think was covered today should be extremely edifying to any business as they think about how to safely emerge from COVID-19. So thank you for your time.
Oh, you're very welcome, David. Thank you for the kind words.
You kidding? It's a pleasure. Take care.